Let's continue our study of the book of Proverbs with another concept, a key concept of fear of the Lord. To fear God is defined in Scripture in various ways. One way in which it is defined is that fear of God is to turn away from evil. Proverbs 8:13, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil. You also get the same kind of language in the book of Job, another wisdom book. Have you considered my servant Job, fearing God and turning away from evil? Again, in the book of Job, in that poem on wisdom in Job 28, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and depart from evil is understanding. Again, parallel with fear of the Lord in the poetic parallelism is to depart from evil. So to fear God is to turn away from evil. To fear God means to obey God. And you get this in the story of Abraham's sacrifice of Isaac in Genesis 22. And he was told to take his son and offer him up as a burnt offering on Mount Moriah. But then God stops him at the end, says, do not lay your hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God. Well, fearing God means here he was willing to obey. So fearing God means obedience. Fearing God also means to have reverence or awe for God. Psalm 33:8. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the people of the world revere him. Again, parallel with fear of the Lord is reverence. Note the synonymous parallelism again. So what is fear of the Lord? It is not being terrorized of God, but rather in taking some of these things together, fear of the Lord is the awe or reverence or respect which a person has for God that causes that person to turn away from evil and to keep God's commandments. It's not terror. Interesting passage in Exodus 20. God told Moses to tell the people, don't be terrified by God, don't be afraid. But God has come so that fear of him might be upon you. And there's a proper and an improper type of fear of God. The improper type of fear is to be terrorized of God. But the proper kind of fear is the fear of God that will cause you to turn away from sin and keep God's commandments. And that's the fear that they were to have as God was delivering them the Ten Commandments in Exodus chapter 20. But the expression reverence is maybe a little too weak. It's not just reverence, but a kind of reverence that will cause you to obey and turn away from evil. Another thing that happens in Proverbs, there are a number of character types that show up, different the wise and the fool. And I'll pick one of those just to illustrate how that works in Proverbs. A word translated either simple or naive. The Hebrew word is pati. Proverbs is addressed to this fool. The purpose of Proverbs is for giving prudence to the simple and knowledge and discretion to the young. Proverbs 1 and verse 4. Again, note that the simple, pati, is also said to be young. The basic meaning of this root, patah, means to be wide or open or spacious. That doesn't mean that he's mentally slow. He's not a simpleton, but he's too open-minded. He's open-minded to good ideas. He's also open-minded to bad ideas. He's open-minded even to enticements. You might say that the pati is a mugwump. I don't know whether you've heard that expression. A mugwump is somebody with his mug on one side of the fence and his wump on the other side of the fence. In other words, he's sitting on the fence and he's undecided. In this case, he's undecided as to which side of the fence he's going to come down on. Is he going to follow the path of wisdom, or is he going to follow the path of folly? Again, the Pati is typically immature and young, and therefore he lacks discernment and is easily deceived. It says the Pati believes everything, but the prudent man considers his steps, Proverbs 14:15. But the Pati is not neutral. He or she is not a tabula rasa or a blank slate, but tends to go astray. That is, he has a waywardness about him, for the waywardness of the Pati shall kill them. Proverbs 1:32. Maybe you've seen this person around. You might find him or her on the back row of church, kind of symbolic of the fact that they have one foot in the church and one foot in the world. And we wonder, which path are they going to follow? Are they going to follow the path of wisdom, which in Christian parlance would include Christ, or the path of folly, which would be the way of the world? Well, the Pati has to decide, because a Pati does not remain a Pati forever. He either accepts instruction and becomes wise, or will become a fool. The book of Proverbs is addressed to the Pati, and its message is urgent, because he must become wise before life's troubles overtake him. Lady Wisdom shouts aloud in the streets to fools such as the Pati. She raises her voice in the public squares. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? If you'd responded to my rebuke, I would have poured out my heart to you and made my thoughts known to you. But since you rejected me when I called, since you ignored my advice, I will turn and laugh at your disaster. I will mock when calamity overtakes you, when calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelms you. So how can the Pati become wise? He must accept God's reproof, and then the spirit of Lady Wisdom will come upon him. He must accept God's instruction. One of the wisdom psalms puts it this way: the testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the Pati, making wise the simple. God's testimony, God's instruction or law is what can do that. Well, let me move on to another subject study, a study of the ideal wise person in the book of Proverbs. The wise person, according to Proverbs, is a hard worker as opposed to the lazy sluggard. The poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Or Proverbs 6:6, go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways and be wise, which having no chief officer or ruler prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of your hands to rest, and your poverty will come upon you like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man. I've sometimes quoted this verse jokingly in class when a student has fallen asleep. When I was in college, a friend of mine had this verse, how long will you lie there, O sluggard, in a bookcase above his head, in his bed. So when he looked up first thing in the morning, he saw that verse staring at him. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? Ideal person is a hard worker. The ideal person is slow to anger. You might say long-suffering. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up strife. You should seek to avoid stirring up strife, giving the diplomatic answer rather than the provocative one. Or Proverbs 15:18, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but the slow to anger pacifies contention. A wise person is discreet with words, whereas fools say whatever pops into their mind. Proverbs 13:3, the one who guards his mouth preserves his life. The one who opens wide his lips comes to ruins. Proverbs 11:13, he who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy conceals a matter. Again, it's not wise to blabber anything that comes into your head. I had an aunt that would, and she was an embarrassment to be around when you were in public. A wise person guards his lips, only says things that are worth saying. And if you have been told something confidentially, you keep it confidential and don't just blab it or post it on internet. The wise person avoids excesses of food. Have you found honey? Eat only what you need, lest you have in excess and vomit it. What a sweet proverb, you might say. But it's making the point. Just because you find a bowl full of honey doesn't mean you have to eat it all like Winnie the Pooh in the children's stories. Same thing about possessions. You should avoid excesses of possessions. Proverbs 30:7-9, the words of Agur, speaks of the danger of having either too much or too little in terms of material possession. With too much, you tend to forget God, but if you have too little, you might be tempted to steal. 2 things I ask of you, O Lord, do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise I may have too much and disown you and say, who is the Lord? Or I may be poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God. One should also avoid excesses in terms of alcoholic drink. In fact, Proverbs 23:29-33 speaks of the evils of alcoholism. Who has woe, who has sorrows, who has strife, who has complaints, who has needless bruises? Those who linger long over wine, who go to sample the bowls of mixed wine. Do not gaze at the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it goes down smoothly. In the end it bites like a snake and poisons like a viper. Your eyes will see strange sights, and your mind imagine confusing things. You will be like one sleeping on the high seas, lying on the top of the rigging. Well, it'd be stupid to take a nap on the top of a rigging. You'll fall off and kill yourself. But when you're drunk, you do stupid things. They hit me, you say, but I am not hurt. Well, you were passed out. You didn't feel it. They beat me, but I don't feel it. And when will I wake up so that I can find another drink? Word about the Bible and alcohol. Bible makes a number of negative statements. We see that in Proverbs 23, the verses we've just read. Proverbs 31, 4-7 urges king to avoid alcoholic drink because then it will blur their judgment when they have to serve as judge and make a decision. New Testament says, do not be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit, Ephesians 5:18. We should balance that out, though, by saying that there are some positive statements made about alcohol. Lady Wisdom serves wine at her table, though it is mixed wine, which means it's been diluted with water, so it's not quite so potent, and even children could drink it. Wine is said to be a symbol of joy in places like Psalm 104, verse 15, where wine is said to make man's heart glad, and the psalmist sees that as part of the wonders of God's creation. Also Ecclesiastes 10 and verse 19. Jesus, unlike John the Baptist, drank wine, and at the wedding of Cana, turned water into wine, John chapter 2. This has bothered certain Christians. Someone has quipped that Jesus turned the water into wine, and some Christians have been trying to turn it back into water ever since. The bottom line is that Scripture says that alcoholic drink is dangerous, though used prudently and properly, it's not necessarily evil.